You might think punishment in ancient Egypt was about keeping order. It wasn't. It was about keeping the universe from collapsing. In the land of pyramids and cosmic calendars, crime wasn't just breaking a law. It was breaking Ma'at, the sacred balance of the world. Steal a loaf of bread? Congratulations, you just threatened existence itself. And the gods were not chill about that. Justice wasn't blind in ancient Egypt. It was divinely sanctioned and had excellent aim. Temple reliefs and legal papyri don't just describe punishments, they justify them, right down to divine approval. People weren't tortured because they were bad. They were tortured because the gods demanded it. One carving at Karnak shows a thief getting flogged under the watchful gaze of Amun-Ra. You'd think that might make it awkward. It didn't. If anything, it was motivational. When someone was whipped, stretched, branded, or buried alive, it wasn't punishment. It was a cosmic reset button. Egyptian priests even had medical papyri detailing how much pain restored balance and what herbs to apply so the accused could survive just long enough to be punished again. In modern terms, that's like a traffic cop giving you a ticket, then hitting you with a lightning bolt because you disrupted planetary harmony. So no, torture wasn't a sign that the system had failed. It was a sign the system was working perfectly. If you ever got punished in ancient Egypt, you didn't just suffer. You performed your suffering. Public beatings weren't just common. They were scheduled, right after grain delivery, right before lunch, and always with an audience. Because in Egypt, pain wasn't private. It was policy. Take branding, for example, not just for cattle. Some women were branded on the face, for adultery, disobedience, or just ticking off the wrong priest. Bronze rods, shaped like cobras, left a mark no one could miss. Literal shame symbols, sacred, of course. And when the beatings weren't enough, you'd be tied up and left for the insects, covered in honey, tossed near a swamp. And the gods, apparently, loved a good bug buffet. But the worst part, victims often had to thank the gods afterward. Some even signed oaths praising Osiris for bringing them back into Ma'at with a missing hand. Imagine getting tortured, then having to leave a Yelp review for the gods. 5 stars, lost an eye, found cosmic balance. Some punishments were loud, others, they lingered. The salt reed method wasn't about making a scene. It was about making sure you remembered the scene every time you sat down for the next 3 weeks. Here's how it worked. Take a bunch of reeds, soak them in salt water, and beat the accused until their skin looked like it had lost an argument with a cactus. The salt got into the wounds, dried inside them, and stayed there. Moving meant scraping open fresh cuts. Standing meant the crystals stabbed deeper. Lying down still hurt. Breathing, that too. This wasn't just sadism, it was sacred biology. Ancient Egyptian medical texts describe how salt preserved divine correction by keeping the wounds open longer. Not healing was part of the plan. And if you're wondering what offense earned this divine spa treatment, sometimes it was theft, sometimes lateness. One record shows a worker getting a full 100 strokes with salt reeds and then sent back to the quarry. The message? Pain wasn't punishment, it was education, holy education. The body was a chalkboard, and the gods wanted to make sure the lesson really stuck. And if you're wondering why pain had to be so poetic, it's because the stakes weren't just personal, they were cosmic. In ancient Egypt, stealing a loaf of bread wasn't seen as petty theft. It was a crack in the universe. Every crime, no matter how small, was treated as a disruption of Ma'at, the divine balance holding the world together. So when a laborer skipped a shift or hid a chisel, it wasn't laziness, it was an existential threat. Order itself was at risk. You weren't just annoying your supervisor, you were offending the gods. This is why Egyptian punishments often felt, let's say, Enthusiastic. Brand someone for gossip? Absolutely. Beat a man for complaining about his rations? Mandatory. Bury someone in the sand for swiping a bit of linen? Necessary to keep the cosmos from collapsing. Ancient wisdom texts warned that greed, selfishness, and even excessive talking could unravel the divine order. The phrase, men who multiply words, appears more than once, which honestly makes you wonder how any scribe survived their job. The point wasn't just to punish behavior, it was to crush the chaos inside you, ideally before your bad attitude summoned a solar eclipse or collapsed the Nile. Because in Egypt, justice wasn't about making things right, it was about keeping everything from falling apart. And if beatings didn't reset your soul, the sand would. Execution by burial wasn't just a death sentence, it was a slow-motion cosmic erasure. The condemned were forced to dig their own graves, a narrow pit, shoulder width, just deep enough to stand upright. It wasn't symbolic, it was logistics. Once the hole was ready, guards filled it back in. With you inside, sand poured up to your neck. Then they waited. This wasn't a quick suffocation, it was a full-body prison under the Egyptian sun. Hours passed. Your mouth dried out, your muscles cramped. You couldn't scream, couldn't sit, couldn't move. And if you fainted, too bad, the heat would wake you up again. Medical papyri later recorded the process in grim detail, not for mercy, but for optimization. Some executioners even timed the burials for midday to maximize dehydration, and sometimes they left the heads exposed for days, as a warning, as a sermon, as proof that Maat had been restored. So yes, in Egypt, you didn't just die, you contributed to moral order, one grain of sand at a time. But if sand was too permanent and salt too subtle, there was always the next best thing, turning your face into a billboard for cosmic shame. Let's talk a little more about branding. Branding in ancient Egypt wasn't just for slaves or livestock. It was a sacred scar, a divine label that said, "This one broke the universe." Women bore it worst. You didn't just carry the pain, you carried the message forever. For men, it was usually the hand or shoulder, places you could cover if you were lucky or clever. But for women, the face was non-negotiable. Visibility was the punishment. One accusation of adultery, one complaint from a husband, and your face was no longer your own. Medical papyri even documented the proper way to revive a woman who fainted mid-branding so the ceremony could continue. Because yes, this was a ceremony, complete with prayers, priests, and the smell of burning flesh wrapped in divine approval. And once branded, you weren't just marked, you were transformed. Branded women were shunned in markets, pelted with stones by children, sometimes even pushed into temple-run brothels, as if defiling Maat had to be paid for with public humiliation. Your body became evidence. Your face became a warning. And every time someone flinched at your presence, the gods smiled. Order had been restored. By now, you've heard the whips, you've seen the brands, but some punishments in ancient Egypt didn't leave marks. They left nothing, no blood, no body, no name on the ration list the next day. Just silence. At the edge of the workers' camps, archaeologists have found small, windowless rooms. No light, no records, no exits. These weren't holding cells. They were disappearance chambers, and once someone was taken there, nobody expected to see them again. No one announced your sentence. No one needed to. One foreman's diary from Giza casually notes, "Sent 3 to correction overnight," right between a tally of bricks and a wine request, as if forced vanishing were just another tool on the belt. The victims, workers who complained, citizens who gossiped, men who questioned rations, people who became inconvenient, No trials, no witnesses. The punishment was absence, swift, silent, and permanent. Families didn't get answers, just fear. Talking about a missing son could get you added to the corrected list. Some families left empty chairs at meals for years, pretending their loved ones might walk back in. They never did. And for the ruling class, this wasn't a failure of justice. It was peak efficiency. No executioner to pay, no scroll to file, just fewer problems. But there was a cost. Worker logs began to show cracks. Too many people vanished and pyramids stalled. One supervisor even complained in a surviving letter, "The silent rooms take more men than the desert." Turns out, when you erase too many voices, even the stones stop stacking. So if you're picturing a harsh but orderly system, think again. Sometimes the gods didn't punish you with pain. They punished you by pretending you never existed. If vanishing in the night was the quiet threat, then punishment by daylight was the daily reminder. At the construction sites of ancient Egypt, the same ones that gave us pyramids and temples, cruelty wasn't hidden. It was logged. Suspension torture, for example, was practically built into the workplace. Workers were hoisted by their wrists behind their backs, left hanging until joints dislocated and nerves gave out. Medical papyri later described the long-term damage in dry terms: shattered shoulders, ruined rotator cuffs, permanent nerve pain, like it was a side effect of stone cutting. But this wasn't limited to isolated cases. Work rosters listed punishments right alongside tool checkouts and ration distributions. One record from the Pyramid Age includes a simple list: limestone delivery, tool repairs, 3 lashings, 1 suspension, nothing out of the ordinary. Even children weren't exempt. Archaeologists have found small tools and tiny gloves at the work sites, and bones showing stress fractures in kids no older than 10. Some were punished just like the adults. Others were dragged along to watch, an early education in pain management. Whippings didn't cause work stoppages. They happened next to the task at hand. A man might be lashed in the morning and limping through his shift by noon, holding a torch with shaking hands. Meanwhile, his name would be marked disciplined in the logbook, as casually as noting who was out sick. Overseers kept rods and copper measuring sticks leaned against walls. Not for decoration, for motivation. These work sites didn't just build monuments, they built compliance, block by block, blow by blow. After generations of public pain and whispered disappearances, something changed. Not in practice, but in presentation. As Egypt's dynasties aged and its rulers grew more image-conscious, the official record of punishment began to shift. Torture didn't stop, but the way it was described softened dramatically. Early judicial documents are blunt, detailing beatings, mutilations, and even execution by burial. But by the time of the New Kingdom, those same actions are framed as acts of discipline, cleansing, or ritual correction. Court scribes traded brutality for balance. Linguistically, at least, temple art joined the rewrite. Scenes that once showed bound prisoners and bleeding backs were replaced by serene processions and symbolic gestures. The instruments of pain, whips, rods, branding irons, started appearing in carvings labeled as measuring tools or holy staffs. Overseers weren't torturers anymore, they were guides of order. This wasn't just a PR move for the living, it was about legacy. Pharaohs wanted to be remembered as enlightened, divine, in control, not as executioners with a sunstroke problem. And over time, they got their wish. Even modern museums and textbooks occasionally echo the cleaned-up version. Rods displayed as agricultural tools, punishment registers interpreted as ration lists. All too easy to miss what those discipline entries actually meant when they sit between columns of stone tallies and fish deliveries. But beneath the whitewashed walls and ceremonial labels, the scars still speak. You just have to know where to look. So what do you call a system where pain isn't a failure, but the intended outcome? In ancient Egypt, cruelty wasn't corruption. It was the blueprint. Torture was law. Branding was divine. Vanishing into the night was just part of keeping the universe in balance. These weren't cracks in the justice system. They were the justice system. It's tempting to look back and think, well, that was then. We've evolved. But it raises a question worth asking. If people believe the gods demand suffering, who gets to decide what mercy looks like? And what happens when cruelty wears a sacred mask? If this made you rethink everything you thought you knew about ancient Egypt, let us know in the comments. What shocked you most? The sand? The branding? The honey? If you're ready for more brutally honest history, the kind that doesn't skip the pain, hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because we're just getting started.